Okay, we're out here at Bob Nelson's place. What's the address, Bob?
33695 Milligan Road,
Right?
Bayfield, Wisconsin, County of Bayfield, yada yada.
To talk with Julian Nelson about his adventures in fishing. So, Julian, we talked a little bit on the phone the other day, and tell me again how old you were when you first went out fishing.
When I first went fishing, I'm pretty sure I was 12 years old, which would make that 1928 because I was born in 1916.
Uh-huh.
So, and that's when I first went on the lake with my father. But
And what was your dad's name?
John Nelson,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what was the boat?
What was the boat?
Yeah.
The boat was the Twin. It was just a partially covered over boat with a house over the center of it. The front part was open, and of course the stern was open too. Yeah. And he just had a spray hood, what we called a spray hood, piece of canvas that went from this wooden structure that was over the engine up to the bow, and when in bad weather, why we put that down, and that took care of some of the spray and the water and the rain and the waves that came in occasionally.
Now, what'd you do? Go out with him just in the summers, or
Well,
also
yes,
after school, or
that was just during the summertime because I was still in school.
right?
But I was involved with the nets 3-4 years before that, and he taught me how to mend nets when I was 8 years old. So I had some experience with nets before I went on the boat with him.
And did you get paid a big sum for this?
We got our board and room.
That's right.
Yeah, but you know, I was so small at that time that we sat on it. Everybody had a chair when you mended nets, and you had that chair to make you more efficient to move. You had to slide it on the cement or the wood or whatever you were sitting on. But in order for my legs to reach the floor, he had to saw the legs off. So I had a special chair, and I used that quite a few years till my legs got long enough to reach the floor on an ordinary chair.
Now, when you were out fishing, what was your job on the boat?
Well, my job on the boat was he ran the boat. He ran the boat and the lifter, and I took the nets off of the lifter, picked the fish, and threw them in a box, and piled the nets in that box, and then we moved them to the back of the boat. When we had the gang in the boat, we called a string of nets a gang, and when that was in the boat, then we turned around, and my job was to get up on the stern deck, and he fed the nets back to me, and I took care of what we called the cork line, and the boat went at a slow speed, and we reset the nets that way.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Oh yeah, but
But that was true. Did all the other fishermen have their kids out there working too?
oh sure. That was standard procedure.
Yeah.
You know, these were people from the old country, and they brought some of their customs with them. And when you were 8-10 years old, why you participated in the family workings.
Now, at that time, how many fishermen, commercial fishermen, would you say there were in Bayfield in the area?
In Bayfield altogether,
Yeah,
oh,
in those days.
I suppose there were 25 or 30 altogether of various sizes. You know, some were smaller fishermen, some had bigger outfits, bigger boats, little bigger boats. Yeah, but at that time, most of the fish boats were about 30 to 35 feet long, wooden boats with 2-cylinder engines. That boat of my father's had a 2-cylinder, 12 horsepower Westman. It made about 7.5 miles an hour.
I mean, you think about the size of that motor for this size of the lake.
Uh,
That was enough, huh?
well, Yes, it was, because we always got back with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you had a tack, and yeah, and believe it or not, even with that little power, there was times when you had to check it down.
Jeez.
Run slow.
Now, were you only doing gill netting? in these
Yes.
days?
Oh, that's all. That's all I did, and that's all my father did was gill nets.
What about some of the other fishermen? Were they? did
Some
every-
there
pretty
was
much-
some pond net fishermen, and there was a combination pond net and gill netters. Yeah,
And what were you fishing for then?
mostly lake trout, whitefish, some whitefish, and herring, of course, in the fall.
And the herring season was big in those days, right?
Well, yes, it was. Well, of course, in the 40s, it got to be the biggest. In the 40s and 50s, there was an awful lot of herring taken out of the lake during the war years and up to 55 and 60. A lot of fishermen, more fishermen than there had ever been.
So the period when you were starting was before that heyday then, as far as herring goes.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the lake trout there were plenty of lake trout. And
There was a good supply of lake trout in the 40s. They started to diminish in the 50s.
Yeah. But in those early days, there weren't restrictions on.
There were some restrictions.
What kind were they? Do you remember?
Well, there was a definite size limit on the mesh that could be used, and there was a definite size limit on the depth of the net.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no limit to the amount of nets that could be used. Yeah.
And how did the fishermen all divide up where they fished? I mean, where did your dad fish?
Well, he fished in several places. He fished off of Bear Island, north of Bear Island, and then he moved to Stockton in 1918, and he fished there, and he retired from there.
Now, and when was the fishing shack built on Stockton?
The fishing stack that we
Yeah.
have now,
Yeah.
well, that was built by Booth Fisheries
Uh-huh.
in the early, or I don't know early, but it's sometime in the 1980s, because that's approximately
In the
the
1880s. You mean.
1880s,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
And did your dad fish for Booth then?
he worked for Booth. Yeah, a lot of the Scandinavians worked for Booth at that time, but Booth didn't stay in business too long. They went out of business around 1907, 8, or 9, right in
Uh-huh.
those years, and then individual fishermen started up.
I see.
Yeah.
So then, how did you buy the place from Booth then, or
No,
how did it work?
Booth just they walked away from it.
They did.
And they left the cabin there. And when my dad started in 1918, he just went and took the cabin and moved it around Anderson Point and set it up where his station was on the northeast corner of that bay.
Now describe exactly where that is.
Well,
If you're going out there by boat.
if you go by boat from Bayfield,
Yeah.
you'd go right, you can take a straight shot to Anderson Point. You would pass Madeline on your right, Bass and Wilson on your left. And when you get to that point, you'd make a sharp left, a right angle left, and go due north. And you would hit that spot where he fished.
Uh-huh.
And one of the cribs that he built the bottom of it is still there.
Is
And
that
that was put there in 1918.
right? God. And so did he? How did it work to stake out a place to put your nets? I mean,
Well-
was it by gentleman's agreement or?
Pretty much. Most all the fishermen had a general area where they fished. Yeah, and they would go back to those areas every year. Occasionally, they'd move around to some, but not to a great extent.
Yeah. because I was, it's a big lake out there.
Oh, yes.
And, how do you choose where to fish? I mean,
Well,
is it by experience? Or?
Those places were discovered by trial and error years ago. Years ago. And for the most part, those places were discovered by those tugs that fished in the early days.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, who else was fishing then with your dad at that time?
Well,
Do you remember some of the names?
Carl Ludvigsen was his partner first when when they started on Stockton. Yeah, but that partnership just lasted a couple of years, and then my dad got his own boat and started up.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a boat when he fished on Bear, off of Bear too, and so he had a sizable fishing outfit to start with.
Did he pretty much stay, aside from having you work with him, stay as a single fisherman? He didn't join up with anybody else after that?
No, but before I was able to go with him, he had to have hired help. Yeah, which they all had. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these were quite seasoned men too, who were familiar with the fishing.
But just didn't have their own boats.
They just didn't have their own boats.
Yeah.
They-
And who were some of the other contemporaries of your dad who were fishing at that time?
At that time,
Yeah. You remember?
well, yeah, there was quite a few. There was, well, like my dad, Carl Ludvigsen. Oh, there was quite a few of the Batans. There were quite a bunch on Willie's Island. Linus Jacobson, John Freed, Olaf Edwards. And in Sand Island, they had quite a bunch. There was Louis Moe and Elvis Moe, which was his son, and Dahls, Norings, Hansons. And on Madeline, there was Martin Christensen and John Hagan.
Who else was on Stockton?
At that time,
Yeah.
there was a Seaver Tigan and Frostman, Ole Frostman. Yeah, but they were on this side of what we call Anderson Point.
Mm-hmm. And then once you started to, when did you start fishing on your own?
I started fishing on my own in 1938. That's when I bought my dad out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So did he retire then?
He retired then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He-
what was the boat then that you were?
The boat I had then was Bess Suzanne, and he had that built in 1935.
And who built that?
Frank Mulkey,
Marie's father.
Marie's father, built that boat.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the first boats that Frank Mulkey built in Bayfield.
And how to get the name?
From my niece,
What was the name again?
Bess Suzanne.
Beth Suzanne.
Yeah.
Right. And your niece, whose daughter was she?
She was Eunice's daughter. Yeah.
And then, so the 1938, you're out there fishing. Who was working with you then?
Gilmore.
And who was he?
Well, he was. He's a descendant from the Batan family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he was with me for about 5 years.
How old was he when he was fishing with you? Was he a
Oh,
younger
he
man?
was a young man, but he was a couple of years older than me.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, in those days, did you fish year-round?
No, we just
When were you fishing?
we fished. We started fishing as soon as the ice left the harbor in the spring, and we fished the trout and the whitefish up until September and October, and then we would fish what we call for chubs, long jaws.
Mm-hmm.
We fished them for about a month, which would bring us right up to herring fishing, and we fished herring, and the herring usually wound up a short time before Christmas, and that was the end of our season.
So it was just about the year-round.
Yeah.
You had a couple months off to...
Oh yeah.
repair
that-
nets and,
That couple of months was spent fixing nets,
yeah,
mending nets.
you didn't sit around and, you didn't go to Florida.
No, we sure didn't. No, we sure didn't.
Well, let's go back to some of the islands. Now, when you would strike out, and from Bayfield, let's say, to go out and check the gill nets, how long would you stay out?
Well, we usually stayed out a week on the island, or most of the times, a lot of times we stayed out for 2 weeks. Yeah. See, we had a pickup boat every day there except Sunday.
And who ran that pickup boat?
Well, that was either run by Booth Fisheries, Solly Bataan, Bayfield Fish Company, and Otto Elkine Company.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So what would you do? Pat, you didn't have ice out there, though. What?
They furnished us with ice.
Oh, they did.
They brought ice. They had ice on the boat. And they would bring our supplies, any supplies that we needed,
Uh-huh.
food and that sort of thing.
And how often would they come out then?
Well, there was a boat every day.
There was.
Yeah, there was two companies that bought fish, and they alternated the runs. One company would come one day, the other company would come the next day, for 6 days a week.
And you took whatever price they gave. Is that?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There was no negotiating.
there was no negotiating.
Yeah. Well, how did you keep the ice from melting out there?
Well, we had ice every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But did you have it in sawdust or covered up? Or
oh yeah, sure. We had a little ice house that and kept it covered up.
Yeah.
Sure.
So after 2 weeks, were you ready to get out of there?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it was time to.
Now, were you married at this time?
Oh no,
No, not yet. You were still a single.
I was still single.
Buck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And where were you living at that time?
I was still living with my parents at that time.
Where was their house?
Well, Bob's house.
Where?
205 North Fifth.
205 North Fifth.
Yeah, right, kitty corner from the park building.
And who's in there now?
Debbie Lind and who's your other one?
Ray Reynolds.
Ray Reynolds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's a rental now, so.
yeah.
Not that one that's for sale.
Nope.
Huh? No.
Kitty Corner.
Kitty corner from there.
Right across the street. It would be Kitty Corner from the National Park Service building.
Yeah,
Big house on the corner there.
Oh, North Fifth. I was thinking. of
205
Fourth.
North Fifth.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah.
And so when you were going out fishing, Julian, I mean, you were also had to deal with the weather.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
you never knew what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And
No, we didn't pay any attention to weather reports. Well, we never even had a radio.
yeah, right. So how did you?
Well, if
How
it
did you
looked good,
navigate? How did you?
if the weather looked good, you went. If it was blowing a gale, you stayed home.
Right.
Yeah,
So by eye.
sure.
Yeah. Would you all fishermen gather and consult or talk
No.
back and forth? Or?
No,
No, you're too independent for this.
sure. If the weather looked like you could make it, you went. That's all. It was no big deal.
Go ahead.
No.
Tell him, Dad, about a typical day on the lake when you get up in the morning. That's kind of an interesting feature.
Yeah, well, my dad was an early riser, and at that time of the year, you know, like in May and June, there's a lot of daylight. So at 4:15, he bounded out of bed, and he built a sizable breakfast. He was a good breakfast eater, and he expected me to eat with him. But he had that breakfast ready at 4:45,
Oh boy.
and I was very seldom in any mood to eat a big breakfast. But he did. And then at 5 o'clock, we were in the boat, ready to go.
So it's dark now.
No, at this time of the year, during May and June, you know, in July,
Yeah.
the days are pretty long. So there was a lot of daylight. It was just breaking day.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we left, and we would usually get back around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was our pretty much the time to meet that pickup boat.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would go off. How many different sets did you have to go to?
At that time, we had 6 different sets. We had enough nets in the lake to keep us busy 6 days.
I see. So you
So
would do,
so the nets were out about a week
so
before we lifted them.
on a given day you would just pick one set of nets.
That's right.
And in those days, what was a good catch? How many
What
boxes?
was a good catch? Oh, a good catch was 1,000 pounds. Yeah.
Every day,
Oh, that wasn't every day.
but that was a good day.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Uh-huh.
There was a lot of days, just 400 or 500 too.
What do you think they're getting now on a good day?
Oh, they would, if they were allowed to fish now, like we did, they'd come in with tons.
Yeah,
Yeah, no question about it.
but with the regulations,
Oh yeah,
they don't come in with much at all.
no.
No.
There's an awful lot of fish in the lake now,
Yeah.
and that's due to the new regulations.
Now, in those days, was this pretty much standard? Everybody would have a fish camp?
Yes,
And go
yeah,
out and stay.
pretty much, yeah.
And which islands had the fish camps?
Well, Madeline, Stockton, South Twin, Rocky, Bear, Sand, Manitou. That pretty well covers it. Yeah,
Anybody at Oak Island then?
yeah. There was a fisherman on Oak Island.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what did you do when you were, if you were back by 4 o'clock, you know, what'd you do in the rest of the day and in the evenings out there?
Well, there was always some nets to work on.
Yeah.
Always some nets to work on. Always.
What'd you do for fun?
For fun,
Yeah.
there was no fun.
You have to go swimming in the dark, eh, Dad?
Yeah.
You mean it was work, work, work?
It was work,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, if you couldn't couldn't go on the lake and lift nets, and if there were no nets to fix, well then you went in the woods and cut wood,
Uh-huh.
and you cut wood not only for your cook stove on the island, but for the cook stove in town, and we'd haul that wood into town too.
Never a dull moment.
There was very few dull moments, nor idle moments.
Now, but at some point you, when did you get married to Marie then?
1948,
Oh, not till then.
not till
So
four.
you fished for 10 years
Yes,
on your own
yeah.
before then. And what about, how many other fishermen were fishing with you about that time, do you think?
How many fishermen in Bayfield fishing?
Yeah, about in the late 30s there. In
Well, there was
or
quite a
early
few
40s.
because the fishing industry was growing. The number of fishermen was improving, or not improving, but there was more fishermen, and it was fairly easy to get into the fishing business because the fish companies, they financed you. Anybody that wanted to get in,
What would they provide?
they would provide the money for your boat and nets,
Uh-huh.
and then you sold them the fish.
But did they keep title to the boat too?
Oh
or-
no,
No.
no,
So you'd have to pay them back out of the
that's right.
fish that you caught.
Yeah, well, you had no choice.
Yeah, of course.
What would you do with the fish?
Yeah.
They owned the fish docks, and they had the markets. They had the ice house. They had everything.
Now, what kind of a living could you make
What-
in those days? Was it a tough?
Well, my father raised 7 kids,
Yeah.
and we never went hungry. We always had clean clothes and enough of it.
And you would do this all with fishing. You didn't have another job.
No, there was no other source of income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very different than today.
Oh, I should say.
Now they can't make a living fishing.
Well,
Yeah,
there's a few.
just fishing.
There's a few making a good living.
Just fishing.
Yeah, just fishing.
Are there?
Yeah, there's a few, but very few. But if it hadn't been for the state buyout, it wouldn't be like it is today.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if the state hadn't bought out these fishermen a few years ago, there would be a lot more fishermen that the existing ones would have to share that fish with.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you got married and started having a family, did you still continue living that out there on the island
Yes. Yeah.
all summer long?
Yeah. Yeah. But at that time, it was 1947 when I moved to Rocky.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that's where the kids grew up.
Now, why did you go to Rocky?
Better harbor. That was the main reason.
And was there a fish camp there already, or
Yes,
what'd
I,
you do?
I bought out an old fisherman
Who
who had built that camp.
and who was he?
Olaf Edwards.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And he had quit fishing by then?
Yeah, he had retired. Yeah, and his land on Rocky was available. He wanted to sell it, and I bought it.
And who else was on Rocky at that time?
Oh, there was Chris Hadlin, Mike Hendrickson, Linus Jacobson, Martin Erickson, Ole Olson, Ted Neese, Laurie Nurse. There was quite a few fishermen on Rocky then. There was 8 or 10.
And everyone fished in a different spot on the lake.
Yeah, but a lot of times you could see them too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and they were real close sometimes. Sure.
Now, what kind of a boat were you using then? Once you got married, and
Well, then I had the Mermaid then.
okay, well, let's go through your boats again. Just start with what was the first one again?
Twin.
The Twin. That was the
That was
open one.
yeah, pretty open.
And what about then the next one?
The next one was the Best Suzanne. That was all closed in.
So that was like the tugs that look like now? Or not?
Similar. It had what we call an open bow deck, but it had a complete house over it. Yeah, just up to that bow deck.
All the way to the back, to the stern?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how long of a boat was that?
That was a 35-footer.
And what kind of an engine was in that one?
We had a Buick in it. A Buick, a Master Buick. During the war and prior to the war, those Master Buicks became very popular in the fish boats.
Why is that?
Well, they were, prior to that, something should be said about the Great Depression.
Yeah.
That impressed a lot of people in more ways than one, and it made you very conscious of a dollar. And so these someone came up with, why don't we try one of those car engines? Because they had been using these 2-cylinder engines, and then there were several of them. My dad had the Westman, and then there was a Regal, and a White, a Wolverine, and maybe a couple other, but they were low powered, slow turning, and these Buicks had more power, and you'd be surprised. Some of those discarded Buicks, those engines were in darn good shape, and we all put them in the boat, and they worked out pretty good.
So you just pull them out of a junk car? Or,
Yeah,
yeah?
Yeah. But then in the 40s, things got better, and there was quite a few Chryslers used. They went from the Buick engine to the Chryslers, and then they got into the diesels later on.
Now, were these car engines 6-cylinder
That
or
car engine,
yeah?
that was a straight six.
Right.
Yeah, they called it a Master Buick.
Uh-huh.
There was two sizes in those Buicks in those days, a standard and a master. Yeah, and most of the engines that we had, practically all of them, they were either a 28, 29, or a 30 model.
So you had to know how to deal with engines as well as
Oh yeah, sure.
the rest of fishing.
Oh yeah, sure.
Was that all learned by doing?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm. But they were pretty darn dependable. Yeah. They were.
Now, what'd you have for navigation?
Navigation, a watch and a compass. That was our only means of navigating.
So how would you go from point A to B then?
Well, you drew a course in good weather,
Mhm.
and you marked the time down.
How
That
long it took,
Yeah, right.
and then what happens when the wind's blowing? You get a crosswind or something. How do you account for that?
Well, a little common sense. You just held up a little bit.
Meaning what?
Meaning, if you had a side wind, you held the boat a little more into the wind than the normal compass course.
And then wouldn't that change the time though? You were
Oh yes,
bucking the wind?
it absolutely it changed the time, and you made allowance for that.
I mean, what if you're in the thick of fog and
Well,
you got to?
well, there was times when if we were doubtful, we'd stop the boat and sound the water, and that would help us. But you could tell pretty close when you were home by getting close to home. Yeah.
I can't imagine it. Yeah, being out there without now with the radar and the GPS and
Well, we did it. And, but of course, there was times too when we went out in the fog and we didn't find the nets.
is that right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
So what'd you do then?
Came home. Sure, you'd run around till noon looking for that buoy, and if you didn't find it by noon, you'd say to hell with it and head her for home. Yeah.
Now you must have been out there in some pretty bad weather.
Oh yes. Yeah.
You remember some of the times when maybe you weren't sure you were going to make it, or
Well, I don't know.
storms and the.
I was never afraid that we weren't going to make it,
You weren't.
but there was times when, of course, when you had to check the boat down, slow the boat down, and you had to do a little maneuvering, yeah, to get away from some of the biggest seas, yeah. But for the most part, we were never really afraid.
I mean, how far from shore were you generally?
Well, we ran with the best Suzanne and the Mermaid. I ran up till 3 hours out in the lake. That was about my furthest runs.
Would you be out in the open water then?
Oh, definite. Well, you couldn't see the islands.
Yeah.
You could not see the islands from that distance. No.
Is that on the southeast bank, that area?
Yeah, the island that was most visible because of its height was Oak Island.
Right.
And most of the time you could pick up Oak Island because of the two knobs up on the height, and that was a pretty good. That helped a lot.
But ordinarily, you were just out of sight of land.
Oh, sure.
And,
Sure.
there must have been I mean, it seems to me that a big storm could come up. You
Well,
got 3 hours to go.
Oh, yes,
You had to keep an eye on that.
yeah,
The storms can come up pretty quick out there,
yeah.
can't they?
There was a couple times when I was in the southeast bank in a heavy southwester, and we went around outer coming home. Took it on the quarter rather than head into it.
Now, what do you mean by took it on the quarter?
Well,
What's that mean?
from the southeast bank to outer island in the southwest wind, you'd have it on the port quarter.
And you were trying to avoid is heading right into the.
You'd
Storm.
tried to.
Now, how big would waves be? What would be a high sea when you were out there?
12, 15 feet is a big sea on Lake Superior around here. I mean, anything bigger than that is practically a hurricane.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was normal?
Oh, there was lots of times when we were out in 8 to 10 foot seas. Oh yeah.
And with a boat that's 35 feet long and.
Oh yeah. You do a little jumping. Yeah.
How deep of water were you setting out there, Dad?
The deepest water that I was in was 550 feet.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What was the range you were on then? Do you remember?
The range?
Yeah, do you remember that?
Yeah, we had Oak Island over the clearing on Stockton. We could see Oak Island. But
Oak
of cour-
Island on the clear.
But at that point, when you were there, then you were pretty close to the Porcupine Mountains too. So the South Shore was visible.
Uh-huh. You know, it's hard to imagine being out there without, and you didn't have any radios,
No,
Right.
no,
nobody to call.
no.
What if the engine quit?
Well, I don't know. I don't know of anybody having. I never got stuck out there.
You never did.
No, and I can't think of anybody else that did even spend a night out due to engine failure.
So you were all pretty good seamen. You had to be.
Oh yeah,
But certainly there must have been. I mean, in the other interviews I've done, there's been people who's had people in their families drowned and never come back.
Yeah,
and
well.
whatever.
oh well. There's been a few drownings around here, sure.
Was there any of your contemporaries that you lost? You were fishing with?
There's some ice fishermen. Yeah, ice fishermen. Yeah, and there. And the smaller boat that left Arbor Lodge once, headed for Manitou, they never made it, but it was a small boat in a real bad northwest. Yeah.
They shouldn't have been out there.
It evidently it capsized and filled up, and that was it.
Yeah. So you never really had a close call then out there? would you
No,
say?
I don't think so.
Wouldn't
I
call
can't
it.
say that I had a close call.
No, that's
Sure.
very lucky.
Tell them about this. Was it the Seabird or which boat did you wind up cracking into on the north end when you're fishing herring?
Oh yeah, well that was when I had the Mermaid, and it was what we call frost smoke in the fall. That frost smoke is created in cold weather when the lake is warm, and that's just as thick or if not thicker than fog. And we got hit by a steelboat. Yeah, and it broke everything on my boat right to the water line.
Just did it broadside you or something? Or?
Well, like that.
Gee.
Yeah, but the Mermaid was pretty new then, and we made it home. Had to do a little pumping, but we just stuck a gunny sack in the hole and nailed a piece of heavy sheet iron over the hole and kept fishing.
Jeez.
Who was with you on the boat?
Let's see. Tommy, my half cousin, was with me, and Bud Sales. Yeah. Wally Young. Yeah.
Now the Mermaid. Describe the Mermaid.
Well, that was a boat I bought after I got out of the service. I got out of the service in 46. Yeah, I was in the Merchant Marine in 44, the Marine Corps in 45, and part of 46. And I came home in the early fall of 46, and I bought the Mermaid from Bill Ivano in Cornucopia. And so I started to fish right away. Got home for herring season, I fished herring season. And that was the fall we had the collision.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and the boat that hit us, it was a good sized boat. It was, I suppose, 65 footer and built out of heavy steel.
Hey, you were lucky it didn't sink you.
Yeah, well, it could have been worse if he had hit us midships, but he hit us about 6 feet back of the bow. Yeah, so the boat was pretty stiff there.
Well-built boat.
Oh yes, it was.
Now, who built the Mermaid?
That was built by Tom Jones in Cornucopia.
Did he build a lot of boats there?
Yeah, he was a boat builder.
Uh,
Yeah,
And Frank was building in Bayfield, wasn't
yeah.
he? Yeah.
Mermaid was one of the fastest boats around, wasn't it, Dad?
Yeah, well, it had a Chrysler in it, and I just used that Chrysler 46 and 47, and then I put a Cummins diesel in it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then, yeah.
So you were, by that time, you were fishing with more than one helper, huh?
For trout and whitefish, it was just one helper, but in the herring season, you had 2 or 3.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Now, on a good day of herring fishing, what would you get?
On a good day of herring fishing, 5-6 ton. Yeah, but I had as much as 11 ton in the Mermaid in one day.
Sitting in the Mermaid.
Yeah,
My God.
yeah,
That's hard to imagine.
yeah.
It must have been right down to the...
No,
No?
the Mermaid carried pretty good. Yeah, but it took a lot of room, 11 ton.
A lot of the boats were down to the gunwales, though.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How long was herring season?
About 3 weeks. I had nine ton in that 35 footer Best Suzanne, and she was down though then, and it was a nice day. Otherwise,
Yeah, good. It's a good thing, huh?
yeah, she was just chock full from one end to the other. There was barely room to you had to crawl on your belly to get from the lifter back to the stern.
Tell them about the picking shacks and stuff, Dad.
Yeah, well, of course, but we didn't. A lot of the fish, we picked after we got ashore. If we had room coming home, then you'd pick on the lake coming back. But
Right.
that didn't amount to too much. But we had picking houses or shacks on the dock, and you pull the nets from the boat into this picking shack on top
So
of a
the
table.
fish are still caught up in the nets.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah. The fish are still in the
And
net.
how'd you pull the? It was all by manpower.
All by
You
manpower.
didn't have a
No,
help with a.
you put a good strong guy there.
How many
Yeah.
guys were in a picking shack then, Dad?
Oh, we had 8 or 10 in the picking shack. Yeah.
Which was out on the island.
No, this is in town.
You're talking in town now.
We're fishing. We fished herring out of town.
I see.
Yeah, not on the island.
Because they came into shallower water.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
So you'd come in with your, say, 11 ton of fish
yeah. That was just once.
but I mean.
That was the biggest load
But
I
you had tons of fish. when you-
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, one year I fished 111 ton in the season.
And what would they sell for?
We probably, I'm not sure. We probably got about 2 cents a pound for them.
What'd you pay a guy in wages in them days?
Wages were probably $12 a day.
Hmm.
Yeah. Then it went up to 14 and 15. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you had guys working for you, you had to get a pretty good
Oh, sure.
load on to
Oh, sure.
make ends meet then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or did you get rich in those years?
No, we didn't get rich, but we made a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get another little load on up to Morty's later on.
Yeah. Yeah, that happened once in a while too. Yeah, there was a few tons of herring caught at Morty's.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But the least I ever got for herring was 3/4 of a cent a pound.
Oh my God.
That was 1935. Yeah. I fished with my dad then. I was just a year out of high school. Yeah, and the Beth Suzanne was new, and we fished for Booth, and we got $15 a ton, 3/4 of a cent a pound.
Boy.
Where'd you have the herring nets then, Dad?
In Big Bay.
Big Bay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, in Big Bay.
And how many nets would you have set out for herring?
Oh, we had, I think we used about 9 or 10 boxes in those days on the Beth Suzanne at that time. But then the herring started to dwindle, and we went to about 15 boxes. And the box of nets at that time, they were about 750 feet long. Yeah. But going back to the Depression, I remember once the year, I'm sure it was 1932. I was a sophomore in high school, and my dad took me out of school. It had been a rough spring, and he got behind with the lifting, and he took me out of school for about 2 or 3 days to help him catch up. And I remember one day we lifted a little more nets than he normally would have, but but we lifted more nets than we normally would have, and we had about 1,500 pounds of nice lake trout. And the price at that time was 8 cents a pound. That's what Booth's was paying, 8 cents a pound. And when we got to the dock, the captain on the Turner, that was the pickup boat, he came over and he pulled my dad aside and he says, John, the price is down today. They were 8 cents. So my dad says, well, how much? He says, they're down to 5 cents. That was a 3 cent drop. And 3 times 1,500 was $45. Well, $45 in 1932, was quite a bit. And my dad hit the ceiling.
What did he do?
Well, what could you do?
He couldn't.
No.
Take it or leave it.
You couldn't eat 1,500 pounds.
Yeah.
But he was pretty mad.
Did he give him hell?
Well, sure, but it wasn't the captain's fault either on that boat. No, but he had to deliver the message.
Who gave the message to the captain?
Yeah, that's somebody.
That came from the office in Bayfield.
Yeah.
Who was the office manager?
Walstead. He was the manager.
So, how many fishermen would say that one guy, Walstead, or how many would he be dealing with at that time?
Oh God, I'll bet you he probably had dealings with at least 25 or 30.
Yeah. And everybody had to take it or leave it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember the best price you ever got?
For lake trout?
Yeah.
Probably the best price we ever got was in the 50s. probably around 35 cents. But just what it got to be in the 60s. But of course, then there wasn't so much fishing going on. In the wintertime, it probably got a little higher.
What is it today? What's a good price today?
I talked to Joe Duffy this morning in Bayfield, and he said they're offering them 75 cents a pound right now for lake trout and 35 cents a pound for whitefish right now. Before Lent. And that's unheard of this time of the year, right, Dad? It should
Yeah.
be the highest ever
Yeah.
now. That's the price right now, 75 cents.
But the biggest lift of lake trout I had was in the fall. And the state wanted us to take some eggs when the trout were spawning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that. And and we had 5,000 pounds overnight out of 14,000 feet of net. And I'm pretty sure we got 28 cents a pound for them. But that's the biggest lift that I know of that came in, that's come into Bayfield, except very early in the 1900s, one of the tugs was supposed to have gotten a lift of something like 9,500. But that also was that was more nets, and but it was in the fall when the lake trout was spawning.
Jack won't give up.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
pest. But he's a good
Now, did you have any other boats?
No.
After that was.
Those were the 3 boats that I
Yeah.
fished on.
What were some of the other boats that you remember in that time as well?
Oh, there was the Egersund and the North Cape and the South Twin, the Lola, the Chinook, the Jenny, the Mildred B.
What about the LaPointe brothers?
The Dis and Dot,
The New P, remember that one?
the Noopy. That was Henry Pitt LaPointe's boat. The two guys, you know how she got named the Noopy?
No.
The 2 guys that owned her was Ernest and Philip LaPointe. Their nicknames was Pitt and Nunn. And so they shortened it up and made the Noopy out of it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And the Dis and Dot, that was built by my dad, or by Marie's dad, and it was built on Madeline Island and for a guy by the name of Art Crone. And every now and then, well, as they were approaching the end, why Art would ask Frank, well, when's the boat going to be done? How much more we got to do on it? And Frank's answer was, well, we got a little bit of Dis and a little bit of Dot left.
That was.
And that was the Dis and Dot. Frank was a German. He never really mastered the English language the way we know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, were these boats all built kind of around the same time?
Well,
I mean, when would they have been built?
quite a few boats were built in the 30s, but they were built periodically. There was the first boat builder that I know of was a guy by the name of John Peterson on Madeline Island. He built quite a few boats. And Olaf Edwards, he was a fisherman. He built quite a few boats. And then Frank built quite a few boats. And my brother-in-law, Avon Christensen, he built quite a few boats too. And he built quite a few boats in the 30s and early 40s. Yeah. and some of his boats are still around. Not, all like the Donnabelle, that was built by Frank Mulkey. The South Wind, that's out at Red Cliff, that was built by Avon Christensen, my brother-in-law. Yeah.
What about some of the others that are still fishing?
Well, they were destroyed, most of them.
Were they?
Wood boats anyway.
Yeah, the wood boats. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
And then there's a lot of then the fishermen, like the Hadlin boys, they went into a steel boat. Jimmy Erickson went into a steel boat. You know, Morris Matan went into a steel boat. Yeah.
Well, and they started out just by putting steel over the wood hull.
That's right. Yeah, they did that too. Yeah.
But the basic design has pretty much stayed the same.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were all built with one thing in mind, and they were all very similar. Yeah.
Well, Iberbadine had the William G. made down, and
Yeah,
Berger built that. But
Iberbadine, he was another fisherman on Madeline that I forgot to mention.
Mhm.
Yeah.
that was the last of the old Berger boats,
Yeah.
or one of the first middle class Berger boats.
Now, who was Berger?
A boat builder.
Was he from here too? Or
No, that was built. I think were they in Green Bay or Sturgeon Bay or someplace?
Manitowoc or what?
Manitowoc, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Bayfield at that time was a pretty flourishing place. It had boat
Oh,
builders.
yeah.
It had the fish
Sure.
companies. It had
Yeah.
a
Wow.
lot of fishermen.
Yeah. During the war years, there, Booth Fisheries alone would employ 80 to 90 people. Yeah.
How many people lived in town back then, Dad?
Oh, I suppose when I was a kid there was 1,200. Yeah, and then through the Depression there was quite a few people. Yeah, in relation to the community now. Yeah, but as times improved, then people moved out again to for work. But it's surprising how many younger people came back to Bayfield during the Depression. Yeah, they came back or didn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not too many of the graduates went on to college. Only a very few. Yeah.
Did any fishermen graduate from college? Was it all just working classers?
I can't think of any, Bob.
They all remain part of the labor force in a local community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't think of any.
The nurses, maybe. Like Harvey Lyle and David Nurse. They don't know if they fished too much, but I think they graduated
Did they?
from Northland. I know David did.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, but David didn't do much fishing either.
Yeah,
Harvey Lyle did most of the fishing.
and Lori
And Laurie. Yeah, Laurie. Sure.
Nurse Senior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the companies. Did you ever feel there was much corruption in them, like Booth and Otto L. Keene and?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I don't think there was real corruption, but they had to make those were kind of tough years. Well, when Keene was here, I mean the supply of fish was going down, and yeah. But there was a time with Booth Fisheries when I really think they took advantage of some of the fishermen. Yeah.
Company store mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that
It
was
was-
the case in many industries,
Yeah.
logging or mining, or
Sure. Yeah.
you could never seem to get ahead.
Yeah.
Tell us
Nobody.
about the old the John the Anderson, the old fish tugs, Dad. Do you remember them at all, or?
Doug Anderson?
Yeah.
No. But my dad talked a lot about the Tug Anderson.
Who were the skippers on that boat? Do you remember?
Was it the Tug Anderson was the name of a boat?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was quite a few tugs at that time. There was the Anderson, the Curry, the Plowboy, the Tramp, the Brower, the Barker.
No, by tugs, what do you mean?
Well, they were steam tugs. Yeah, there was the steam tugs that the fish companies had. Solly Bataan had two, the R.T. Roy and the Elsie Nell.
And how big were these tugs?
Oh, those tugs were 60 footers, 50 to 65 footers. Yeah.
And they used them for transporting fish and fishing herring, that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, some of those tugs fished gillnet rigs in the spring. Sure, and that's where my father and a lot of my others first started. They started with Booth and were on those tugs fixing nets and that sort of. That's what my dad did on Stockton. From about let's see, the first year he was here, which was 1897, he worked for Pete Hanson.
I'm out of tape,
Oh,
so we may have to.
well,
Just a second, Julian. I want to get this. Okay.
okay. Well, my father was the youngest of four boys. And of course, at that time in Norway, the custom was that you were confirmed. They were religious people. But once you were confirmed, and you were confirmed at the age of 14, then you were out on your own. And so, as soon as he was confirmed, he went on as a cook on one of the fishing boats along the coast of Norway, and he started fishing there. But his three other brothers,
Now, what was back up a little? What was your dad's name again?
John Nelson, yeah. But his three other brothers, they had left Norway and they had come to this country. The oldest one, when he came, he came to around La Crosse in Wisconsin. And he eventually wound up in North Dakota. But he married early, and he and this young bride, they got hold of a team of oxen around La Crosse, and they moved to the Dakotas, and they floated the oxen and the wagon across the Red River, and my dad told me that this older brother, he couldn't get over the prairie land because he had never seen anything like that. The prairie grass was as high as his shoulders, and this uncle of mine, he was just dumbfounded. I mean, and of course that soil, that was in the very early 1880s, and at that time that soil had never been turned over.
Right.
So you can imagine, how he was impressed coming from this rocky country. Well, and he lived there until he died, passed away there sometime in the 30s. but he was considerably older than my father. Must have been 15 or 18 years older than my father. And then his other two brothers, one of them, the one closest to him, he had come to Bayfield. And how he landed and why he landed in Bayfield, I do not know. But he was here. And so that was why my father got to Bayfield. And he came through Sault Ste. Marie, got there. And Charlie Benson, for some reason, my other uncle must have given him Charlie Benson's name. And Charlie Benson took him off the train and brought him to Sand Island. And he worked for Pete Hanson there, a fisherman. Pete Hanson was the father of Fred Hanson, the great-grandfather of these boys today. And he worked there that summer. And then he got connected with Booth Fisheries and got onto the tugs. But the first years that he was here, when they fished herring, they just left the nets out a few hours. They string the nets, and then they would go to the other end and pick it up, and that net would be full of herring. And they pulled this, there was 5 or 6 men on the tug, and they had a roller over the side of the boat, and there was 5 or 6 men, and they would just grab around the nets like this and walk across the deck with it. And then go back to the lifter, grab another armful and walk across the deck with it. And that's how they pulled those nets.
Just brute strength.
Yeah. And they were full of herring, just full. And they never left them out over. If they were left out overnight, it was on a rare occasion. But ordinarily they would just set them. But this was set them and lift them in a few hours. But this was before 1900.
Right.
And after that, of course, then the herring started to diminish, and then they made a practice of just lifting every day, the nets every day. And then he was a steady employee of Booth. And then when Booth quit around 7, 8 or 9, that's when he got his own outfit and he started to fish. My father started to fish for himself in 1909. Then he had his own boat and was fishing off of Bear Island.
What was that boat again? Name of that boat?
I don't think it had a name, just had a number. It was a little open boat. Yeah. Yeah, probably, I don't even remember, it was before my time. Yeah. It was probably maybe 25 feet long or something like that.
What are you doing the bull gang for Booth down there, Dad?
The bull gang?
With the herring bull gang?
Well, yeah, there was a couple of winters when he worked with the foreman on the Booth dock, maintaining the docks. Yeah, and most of those docks were built, by that crew, and most of them were built on piling, and they had a pile driver with a wooden hammer, but it was pulled to the top by these men, and then they would release it, and that heavy hammer would come down on the piling. That's how they drove those piling. Yeah, and a couple winters he and his brother they cut wood for the school up where Betzel's are, and they got 75 cents a cord. They cut it in certain lengths, and they split it, piled it up, and they cut 6 cords a day between the two. So they made 75. They made 2 1/4 a day a piece, and they used with a crosscut saw.
Now, what physical size was your dad? Was he a kind of a
Oh,
big,
yeah.
strong guy, or
No, he wasn't. I think he was. I'd say he was an inch shorter than me. Don't you think, Bob?
Yeah, somewhere's in there.
Yeah, but his average weight was 155 to 160. But he was pretty sinewy,
he was strong?
yeah, and strong and
Yeah.
wiry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and when those first Norwegians came over here, everything looked pretty good to them because they were comparing it to what they had left. Yeah.
How fast a dresser Dad was, John? Was he a good dresser? or-
Oh, there was nobody that could dress trout like my dad.
Now, what do you mean by dressed trout?
Clean them. Yeah, take the gills out and the innards. Yeah, no one. And he knew how to sharpen a knife. Yeah, he could keep a knife sharp. Yeah, and he knew how to file a crosscut too, and he learned that. He said because it made a difference.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
with each pull.
It's a
Yeah.
cross cut when it's cutting. It's a devil's whip when it's not cutting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of hard work in those days.
Oh, it was all physical.
Yeah.
All
Of
physical.
course, everybody did that. so-
Everybody did that,
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
How many did he used to dress herring too in the fall, Dad?
No, he never dressed herring.
Yeah.
No,
That was a breed of guy within itself too.
yeah.
Well, I'd heard that in those herring sheds, though everybody would work in there, and
Oh, a lot of people worked in
the
there.
women and kids.
The women and kids, they even shut the school down.
Did they?
Yeah, and well, I don't know. I shouldn't say shut the school down, but they allowed kids to go down and pick herring, help picking herring, and of course they made a few bucks.
Is that something you did in your youth?
I didn't do too much of that. No, I didn't.
How about your mother? Did she-
No,
No?
my mother never got into the fishing. In no way.
No, not at all.
No, she stayed in the house. Well, she had 5 girls and 2 boys to take care of.
So she wouldn't come out to the fish camp?
In the early days, she did, yeah. But after the girls got big enough to go to school, then there wasn't too much of that. Yeah.
What about when you got married and had family? Did Marie and the kids come out?
Yeah, Marie and the kids, yeah, they spent time out on Rocky.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you remember of that, Bob? Anything?
I remember a lot actually.
Yeah.
I go back to right to 1950. It's probably out there in the summer of '50 a little bit, and
Yeah.
from then on I haven't missed a year. So
Yeah.
So they would come out and stay,
Yeah.
and you would go out fishing and come back.
Sure.
And, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, one of my favorite sounds to this day is the sound of oarlocks. In the morning, you could hear my dad and whoever was with him
Yeah.
be rowing that skiff out to the boat, and I can still hear that kawunk, 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 kawunk.
Yeah. You could hear them oars in the oarlock.
Yeah,
So you'd have the boat anchored offshore then.
Yeah, we anchored the boat all the time. Yeah.
that's the same set of anchors that came from Stockton Island we got over there right now.
Yeah.
It's the same rig that we have the clutch on, John. So
Yeah.
So you still go out there to
Oh yeah. Yeah.
without the fishing.
Yeah. 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 We had a nice family reunion there last year. Yeah. It was last summer. It was 100 years since my father brought his new bride into that cabin that we got there. So,
Boy.
yeah. Yeah, and that's the 4th location for that cabin now. So I guess you can say every time we moved, we took our house with us.
That's right. And how long do you have the rights to that place? out
Well,
there?
Bob and Heidi have it for their life.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it reverts back to the park.
Then it goes to the park.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was good that you hung on to it.
Oh, yeah.
Was that a hard decision to make at the time? Do you remember?
Not really. Not really. No. No, not really.
Because some people I know
Yeah.
sold their places and regretted it.
Yeah. I know. So, some people took 25 years. Some people sold outright. And,
Yeah.
but Marie and I, we decided to turn it over to the kids before the park became law.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. What year did we do that, Bob? Do you remember?
74, wasn't it? Park came into being in 72.
No, the park became law in 1970.
70.
Yeah.
So maybe
So-
72.
No, we turned that over before the park became law.
Oh.
So it would have to been in the 60s.
68, 69.
Yeah.
We were just out of high school then.
Yeah.
That's when you sold a piece of property to Bob and
Yeah.
Ollie and John Chapin.
Right. Yeah.
Out there?
Yeah.
So who were they now?
What's that?
Who were they?
Well, I sold one portion of it to my sister Olive. Yeah, and then when she left and didn't go back to the island anymore, she gave it back to me.
I see.
Yeah. So,
There was 7.26 acres there.
is that what there was?
Yeah, and I think it was roughly close to about 1,000 feet of beachfront.
Yeah.
Prime.
So what is it now?
It's
Same.
it's in the park because they elected to take 25 years,
Oh, I
and
see.
so that piece went to the park in '99.
I
That's why
see.
we had to move the cabin down.
And so that's when we wanted to move the cabin down.
I see.
Tell them the story about how that cabin got moved, Dad.
Well, it was in 1947. It was no simple thing to move that from Stockton to Rocky, and but I had Hulver Wright, and he was the boatyard man down there, and I talked to him about it. I took him out there and showed him the cabin and asked him if he thought it could be moved, and he said, "Sure, we can move it." So he had a big, good sized pond boat, and we started, but I'm sure we spent 2 weeks, getting that cabin moved, and we had
How'd you get it into the boat?
huh?
How'd you get it into the boat?
With a block and line and a winch, hand winch, and some big timber, got big timbers underneath it. And with the hand winch, we winched it around, turned it around, and slid her down the bank onto that barge, and away we went. It was in the evening, and Jesus, we run into bad weather, and boy, we darn near lost that cabin that night. It was darker than hell, and it was a real heavy swell from the northeast, and then the wind picked up, and then we were screwed. And we scooted back to Stockton, and she sunk on us right on the beach. We put her on the beach. That was the only way to save her, and she sunk right there on the beach. But the cabin stayed. She was up high enough so the cabin didn't get wet. So we had to pull it off of that barge, take that barge to town, pull the barge out, and repair that. And that was twisted and banged up all to hell on them rocks that night. And recorked it. And when we got her fixed, we went back out and we loaded her on again. And that time we were damn sure we had nice weather. And in an hour and a half we were at Rocky with it. I pulled the barge with the mermaid, and we got there. Oh, I think it was just getting dark that night when we got there and got her parked on the beach, and the next morning she was on dry land. Yeah.
So then you had to winch it back up.
Oh yeah, and then we had to winch it back on.
All bulwark.
All bulwark. Oh, that was bulwark, and those heavy planks and timbers that we had. Everything had to be lifted by hand. Of course, we were young. Hell,
Yeah.
I was in my 30s. Prime of life. So was Tommy and the other guys. We didn't think too much of it. That's what you had to do, and you did it.
Yeah. So who else helped you with that?
Well, the guy that was fishing with me, Tommy Thompson, and Hulver Wrighton, he had Bill Noring and Van Ashman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've been trying to think ever since how much I paid Hulver for that, but it's just has left me. I have no idea. But
Tell John about when we moved it in 2000, Dad.
oh,
How that went.
I didn't do a thing. When we moved it. What was that? 2000 or no? It was 2001, wasn't it?
2001, maybe.
Yeah, 2001. Randy Erickson brought a lot of equipment out there, and Bob had some timbers cut up on his plantation, and that machinery shoved the logs underneath there, and that backhoe hooked onto it, and half an hour it was down the beach. Altogether different.
We left at 10:30 in the morning with that thing down the beach, and it was leveled up by noon that day,
Yeah,
ready to hop into.
yeah,
So it was a big front end loader and a big backhoe
yeah.
that lifted it up, and
Well,
we just drove.
did they bring that on the outer island?
Yeah, they brought it out there on the outer island.
Yeah.
I've got the photos here, John, if you ever want to see them.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
got a tape too of it.
yeah. I've got a tape of it.
So this was to move that cabin off the parkland, what would become
Yeah,
parkland.
and we moved it down to Bobby's in Heidi's land.
Right.
Yeah, and that was the cabin that my dad brought his new bride to in 1903.
Boy. A lot of history in your family out
There's
there.
a lot of history in that cabin. If that cabin could talk, we should have had a tape of that, John, of what went on in that.
A few things went on in that cabin.
Oh yes. Yeah, over the years.
Yeah, it took us forever to get the paperwork done on it, and finally
Yeah.
it came down to a deal where the park said, we don't think that we'll be able to allow you to move that down there. And we said, why? Because it sounded logical. He said, well, we paid $500 for it, we bid for it, won the bid on it, we wanted to move it down to our property. And they said, well, we don't think that'll work. And we said, why? And they said, well, you can't have a public home on park land. And we said, well, we'll fix that up real easy. We'll just give you the building once it's on its place. So once it resided there and we had it leveled up, we handed them a letter that all three of us had signed saying, the Nelson family hereby gives to the people of the United States this building back. We kind of just didn't say the word National Park Service, but we said the people. And that's the rest of the story on that cabin, as to why it's there.
Well, it's good you've been able to preserve that
Yeah,
out there.
yeah,
And Rocky Island right now is run, we've kept it to being very traditional, and we want to keep it the fish camp look.
yeah.
You'll see everything in period out there right now, except maybe for a few gas lights and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's in period, and we want to hold that integrity out there for other kids so they can come by and see it.
Yeah. So that's about all I can tell you, John, unless you got some more specific questions.
Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about, you know, as you were growing up, how you saw Bayfield change
Well,
in those early years. You know, particularly as the fishing would ebb and flow.
yeah.
You know,
Well, there's no doubt but what there's been a lot of changes since I was a little kid. At that time,
Tell us about the school system, Dad.
the school system. Well, I don't know. There's much to tell. I started school in what we call the low school, and that was located where the Baptist church is now. And that building was torn down, I think, in the 40s sometime. But I went to the first 4 grades there, plus 2 years of kindergarten, and then I went to a high school. And of course, at that time, it was just the sandstone building. There was nothing else there. I had 2 years of manual training, and the gymnasium was in where the park building is now. And so we would, you know, just run back and forth from what we call the high school to the gym, and that's where the manual training, and the girls had domestic science there too at that time. But that only lasted a couple of years, and they discontinued that. And then during the Depression, there was some government money available, and they renovated the old courthouse. They changed it completely and did away with the old courtroom that we used to play basketball in, and made the gym, and it went the other way, and with bleachers and that. Mm-hmm. And then I guess it was around 53 or so when they built the gym up at where the high school is now. But I graduated in 34, so all that building up there, that's been done since I graduated.
now, what grades were up there then?
What?
What grades were up in the high school building?
Well, it was, when I went there, it was from the 5th through 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the Catholic school was also running.
And the Catholic also had, they went to the 8th grade.
Right.
Yeah. And then some of them came over to our school, you know, to start what we call high school, which was the 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What percentage of kids, Dad, that you start in the 1st grade would have graduated with you by the time you were in 12th grade? What was the attrition rate?
I really can't answer that, Bob, but I can tell you, in 1934, when I graduated, there was only one student that was part Native American. Mm-hmm. 1 out of 20. That's 5%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many kids were in grade school with you when you started?
I really don't remember.
Class of 30, or, you know?
Yeah. Well, it was bigger. Naturally, it was bigger in the grades than it was when we got to high school, because they would drop out. That would be, yeah. Yeah.
Who was the superintendent of schools when you left there?
Lila Stark.
Lila Stark?
Yeah.
Can you back up to when you started as to who the superintendents were?
There was a Mitchell before my time, and then there was, I don't know if his name was Holmes or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Lila Stark. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as you said before, most kids, if they did graduate, they just stayed here generally and
Yeah.
went to work.
Yeah, went to work.
Yeah.
But quite a few of them went to the cities to find work too.
Did they?
They did, yeah. But like I say, not too many went on to college. You know, those were hard times.
Mm-hmm.
They wind up in Detroit in those areas?
Yeah, a lot of them went to Detroit. Yeah. Yeah.
There's just a slightly older ring of people that went down there first and told the other young people to come down there
Yeah.
and work for Ford Motor Company or
General
Fisher-
Motors.
Fisher Body, that type of thing.
Yeah. AC Sparkplug and Fisher Bodies. Yeah.
The Norwegian Lutheran Church, Dad. What involvement did your family have in that?
Well, they were real churchgoers. Yeah, they were very, very devout Christians, Lutherans. Yeah, they were very much a part of the church. Yeah,
Was the church where it is now?
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been added on to quite a bit
Yeah.
and changed a lot. Yeah, they were married there in the church.
There's a picture, John, of the old church the way I remember it right here.
Yeah.
And that's got a,
Why don't you hold that up in front of Julian there?
take that, Dad, and just show that picture there of the Lutheran Church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way the church looked when I was confirmed.
That's the way it was when I was confirmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me get.
Bethesda.
Yeah.
Yeah, a classic church.
That was a commemorative plate, I think, for 50 years.
Yeah. Could be.
And I've got 2 of those. There aren't very many of them around.
No.
But it's got a list of all the pastors on the back there from the day one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad and his wedding troop. They were married in that church on January 3rd, 1903. And the following day, they hired a team of horses from the livery barn in Bayfield and a sleigh, and they went to Washburn to have their pictures taken. And it took them all day from Bayfield to Washburn with that team of horses and sleigh to have their picture taken and get back to Bayfield. When I was a kid, the road to Washburn wasn't even open in the wintertime.
No?
I remember when they opened that. Everybody went by train.
And so that's how they got around, by train?
Yeah, they went by yeah, there was 3 trains in and out of Bayfield every day in those early days. Yeah.
The scoot. Now they call it the scoot?
Yeah, the scoot. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the fishing.
Take that down.
Yeah.
When did you quit fishing, Julian?
Yeah, in the early 60s, middle 60s, in there, 62 or 63. I went to work for the ferry line in 62, but I still was connected to the fishing a little bit then, but not too much. So it was 60, I would say I got out of the fishing in about 63, completely.
And so then you were captaining on the ferry?
On the ferry.
What was the ferry then? Which ferry?
That was the Gare Howe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Well, that was a 7-car ferry. Yeah,
Wooden boat?
no, it was a steel boat. Yeah, it was steel, but if you drove on, you had to back off, or if you wanted to drive off, you had to back on. Yeah, it was it just loaded from the back end.
And did it have an enclosed place for passengers
Yes, it had an enclosed place for passengers. Yeah.
on the upper deck or?
On the upper deck,
Yeah.
right. Hmm.
And how often was that the only ferry that ran then?
Oh no, no.
Which
The other
other?
there was another line running too. Harry Nelson had purchased the Seeberger's boat, and he was operating the Nichevo,
Hmm.
the old Nichevo.
So there were two different ferry companies?
There was two different ferry companies.
What was the ferry company you worked for?
Well, I was Howard Russell. Now it's the Madeline Island Ferry Line.
Right.
They
Did they merge at some
they,
point?
they merged in the 70s.
And how long did you captain on the ferry?
My last year on the ferry was 1980.
Uh-huh.
So
So quite a long time.
yeah, so I've been retired now 23 years. Doesn't seem that long, but
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
How old are you now, Julian?
88.
And going strong.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm going strong. No, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't.
But of sound mind, though.
Well, there's people that'll question that too.
Not Marie, though.
Well, I don't know.
That you'll have to get out of her.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, could you just go right from the captaining a fishing boat to captaining a ferry? Do you have to go to take?
Well,
You have
you
to
had
take
to take a
exams.
test. Sure, you had to take a Coast Guard test.
Coast Guard
To get papers, to get a license. Yeah. Yeah.
But you had been in, you said, in the merchant marine,
Yeah, I had.
Before.
Yeah.
and with all your experience fishing. right?
Yeah. So I didn't have any problem passing the test. No, I didn't.
Oh, you were moving to a much bigger boat.
Oh yeah.
How long was the Garhow?
Garhow was 65.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then in '66 they built the Island Queen. Yeah. Yeah.
And did just those two, the Nichevo and the Island Queen, were the only ones running till 1980 when you quit?
Well, they had built the Madeline shortly after I retired.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And a couple of years ago they purchased the Bayfield from out east.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different world now with the
Oh,
ferries.
it sure is. It sure is. It's a different operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, they've got a lot of equipment that we didn't have.
Now, were they running the wind sled in those days?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I started with the ferry, we didn't have a sounder. We didn't have a radar or anything like that. We went by course and time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And did you run less often than they do now
No, pretty much.
on the hour?
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, there's more trips now
Yeah.
than there was when I was there. Sure, but they got more boats, and more people involved.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger operation.
Was the landing the same as it is now?
Pretty much.
Ferry would come in at that same spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, when I started, the only landing was at the city dock,
I
and then
see.
it was in the late '70s that they moved to the Booth property.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you've spent a few years on the water.
Oh yes. Yeah, I've covered a few miles. Yeah.
What was the best job you ever had?
Best job?
Tilling up the garden, or picking weeds, or
Oh, I don't know. That ferry job wasn't the worst. There was times during the summertime when it became a little hectic, but it was a short. That was a short time, so you wouldn't want 12 months of it. Oh, but for a couple of months, by and large, it was still a pretty good job. Yeah. And
you-
and
What'd you do in the wintertime then? When you weren't
I fixed nets in the wintertime for the fishermen.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did quite a bit of that.
Who did you fix nets for?
Oh, anybody that wanted nets fixed. I seemed a lot of new nets for guys. Yeah, and fixed old ones. Yeah,
Where would you do that, Julian?
I did that in the basement when we were in the building that we had downtown.
Bell building.
Yeah,
The Bell Building.
in the Bell building. Yeah, that was a good place to work down
And
there.
were you living upstairs then? At that
Yeah,
time?
we were living upstairs then.
Uh-huh.
On the store.
When did you move it? When did you get that store and move up there?
We got that store, I think, about 1960.
So just before you quit fishing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Mom ran that.
Yeah. Marie ran
Ran
that.
the
I,
store.
you know,
And what was for sale in the store?
clothing and some shoes. Yeah. Yeah. You have to talk to Marie about that. That was her department.
You didn't interfere with that.
Not a bit. No, she didn't interfere in the fishing, and I didn't interfere in the clothing.
What was the name of your dog that used to stand on the roof there? And
Oh,
bark?
that was Mr. Mutt Mutt.
Mutt Mutt, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, he was a nice dog. Yeah,
His mother was a purebred Springer Spaniel, and his father came from a good neighborhood. That's what. That's
Right.
what Heidi used to say all the time.
yeah,
People would inquire of his breed.
Sure, because you used to stand right up on the roof there and
yeah. Well,
keep an eye on things.
yeah, well, yeah. We had a window that opened up out on the deck there, and he could jump out through that. Yeah,
Go your boy.
yeah.
If you had it to do over again in your life, what would you change?
What would I change if I could do it over? Well, to tell you the truth, if I could do it all over again, I would go to college. Yeah, I would.
Do you know what you might have pursued in college?
All that I'm not too sure of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would have gone to college if I could do it over.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting aspect because in the days when Dad was a kid, all the girls got educations
Yeah,
and the boys remained on the fish boat.
Yeah.
And that was, I don't know if that was synonymous with everybody in this area.
yeah, pretty much.
So your sisters went to college?
Well, see, two of them went to nursing school, two of them went to college to be teacher, and one went to a business school for business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But that wasn't an option for you.
no, it
No.
wasn't.
You got
You know,
two years of manual arts.
For some reason or other, when I graduated in '34, it was just assumed, I guess, that I would stay and fish with my father.
Yeah.
That there wasn't even any talk about anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that time did you remember having any kind of a yearning to go to college? And
I don't think I really did. No, I don't. No, I know it was not. It did not become an issue.
yeah.
No. Yeah. I guess I assumed the same thing as my dad did, that I would just stay there and help him.
Yeah.
Did he ever promise you the rig in them days, or?
No. But he gave me a real good deal when I bought it.
You mean the boat?
Yeah.
Yo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, he gave me a good deal.
So what did you pay him off gradually then?
No, I had saved enough money to.
Oh, you had.
He took me for 2 years before that. I was a partner with him in the herring season, and we done real well. Yeah, those 2 years, and so I accumulated $2,000 or $3,000 in those 2 years.
That was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. Yeah, that was in 36 and 37. Yeah, and that was a lot of money at that time.
Yeah.
So, with the other monies, little monies that I had saved, and with that, I was able to pay him off. Yeah, in cash.
And how old was he then when he sold?
Yeah, he was 60 years old when he retired in 38.
And how long did he live then?
He lived until 64. He died in 64. He was 86 years old then.
And so what did he do those last years of his
He,
life?
those last years, he did a lot of net work for fishermen and for Booth Fisheries.
Uh-huh.
He seemed a lot of made new nets. Yeah. Besides maintaining his house, and he had a garden and lawn and all that.
So the Nelsons were known for their net
Oh yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah,
Because there's a real art to that too, isn't there?
yeah. Well, yeah, he took me aside when I was 8 years old and showed me how to mend a net. Yeah. And that was a custom that they brought from the old country too, you know. Yeah.
Well, in fact, it didn't change that much for quite a while.
No,
Oh,
no.
then the boats got bigger and you got bigger engines.
Yeah.
But the actual put the nets in the water, pull
Yeah.
the nets out of the water,
Yeah, no,
dress the fish, and
yeah. That
Width on the inside there?
that church that you looked at is very much like the church that he went to in Norway.
Yeah.
Very much like it.
Yeah.
They brought that with them too, along with some of their customs.
right,
Door size is 55.
lutefisk.
Lutefisk, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you had said the Swedes got here a little before the Norwegians.
Yeah, they came a few years before. The earliest Norwegian that I know of that came was a guy by the name of Hanson, and he was one of the first fishermen on Rocky Island too, and he came sometime in the 1880s.
I'm sanded over
Uh-huh.
to the
Yeah.
window now, but I got the
So-
bottom area to do there. Yeah, there's no.
So-
And then I suppose the word spread back there in Norway,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Well, you see, things were darn tough
Thank you.
in Norway at that time. They're not like they are today, John.
Yeah.
People in Norway have it real good today, and well, all the Scandinavian countries.
And,
Yeah.
that will come into play.
But that was a tough time then.
That was a tough time.
DNR to get it designated
Yeah.
school force, and at that point in time, we'll start to.
And at that time, you know,
Yeah, uses up there and things like that, so.
the boys were conscripted too for military service,
It was just.
and there was some of them that left the country on account of that too, to get away from that.
Okay, that's the update, so,
Yeah,
okay, bye.
Yeah.
yeah. And my oldest sister couldn't speak a word of English when she started school. No, she couldn't.
Did you ever speak Norwegian when you were young?
Very little, very little. But I understood. My father talked to me in Norwegian all the time,
Oh,
and
you
I
did?
would answer him in English. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I'd learned more about it. No,
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
They all had to learn the catechism in Norwegian, except you didn't, did you?
No, we didn't. We had the English. Yeah. All the girls were confirmed in the Norwegian language. Yeah. Yeah.
Did the Swedes have their own church?
The Swedes had their own church
Now,
too.
which church was that?
That's well, it's a block up. There's a home there now, where that church was.
Block
Oh.
up from the Lutheran church.
Block up from the, or 2 blocks up from the Lutheran church, due west.
What year did that church, did that burn down or?
No, it's Olaf Selfers, I think, tore that down, and he's the one that started the home there.
So that home is still there.
Mm-hmm.
What year did they not do the Swedish Lutheran Church?
I don't know. I forgot now.
In the 30s or 20s?
Yeah, there used to be a Methodist church in Bayfield too, and that was between Mary Rice and G's
Right.
on that vacant lot there. There was a Methodist church there.
That did burn down, didn't it? That's what I recall.
Maybe it did. Yeah, I've forgotten now. Yeah.
Well, what else? Bobby, have you got anything else that you know about that we've not covered? Particularly about fishing.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Hans Austa at Outer Island. And how your dad got, did you mention how your dad bought that fishing operation from him?
Yeah. Yeah, well, Hans Hanson, when he first came here, he was a fisherman. And he and Charlie Benson fished together. They were kind of partners. And they even fished off of Outer Island on the very northeast corner of Outer. And there's a little bay there. And that bay became known as Hans Austa's Bay because they would they would fish off of there, and they would pull. They had a small sailboat, and they were able to pull that up on a flat rock there in that bay. Yeah.
Now,
But-
where's that in relationship to the lighthouse?
That would be south and southeast of the lighthouse. Yeah, but kind of on the other side.
So it was more protected.
Yeah, well, it's exposed to a lot of weather.
Yeah.
Not
Uh,
nice.
No.
That outer island is pretty much out there by itself. Yeah.
It's the back seas along there get you too.
Oh, yeah.
Those
Yeah.
seas slamming those big cave rocks
Yeah.
up there, and then they work backwards. And
Yeah, I remember Hans Austin. Yeah.
What was,
Was
he?
he-
What was he like?
He was a big, burly brute, a big, strong man, real strong. And like my father said, everything he touched, he applied all his weight to it. He says when he set a nut, he says you couldn't get it off. Yeah, yeah. And my father bought him out in 1909. That's how my dad got started with a rig for himself. But Hans seemed a lot of nets after he retired, and yeah, that's what occupied his time.
So that was common. You'd retire and then work on nets. And,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys did that.
Pick
Yeah,
up some money and
yeah.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was.
tell us about the twine salesman.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, sure. No, there was 3 or 4 different twine companies, and they all had salesmen, and they all came to Bayfield to sell twine. You know. Well, they were some characters too.
Were they?
Oh, were they? Yeah, they were pretty hard drinkers and fast livers. Yeah, but their purpose in life was to sell twine. And
What were their names?
well, there was Archie Meyer, Pete Block, Howard Balch. Those are the three that I remembered. Most then there was the Linen Thread Company and the Fish Net and Twine Company and Paul's Fish Net. They were all companies that made fish nets. But the Linen Thread Company, their biggest item was making thread that they used to sew shoes with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was their big item. But they were also into the netting. Yeah.
So would each fisherman buy his twine separately from these guys?
Yeah, well, but then it got to the point where the twine companies bought the twine. Yeah, and the fishermen would
Yeah, this is
get it
Bob.
from the twine
How you
companies.
doing?
From the fish companies.
Okay, good.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah, we never did that very much. My dad always managed to have enough money to replace any nets he needed by himself. He never relied on the fish company.
$2,700.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then you'd be in debt to them.
Yeah, well, sure. That was how they got a hold of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left here, Julian,
Yeah.
on this tape. What about Wrighton, Oliver Wrighton? What was he like?
Oh, he was really a good guy. Yeah. Kind of slow, but methodical, Yeah,
That's
and,
not zinc included, so that would be
and very reasonable.
a couple hundred more.
Yeah, he did a lot of work for the
We
fishermen
haven't made
for
any decisions yet, and we haven't.
for very
talked
little
much
money.
further than our conversation.
yeah.
So I'll talk to Sue
And,
and see what she has to say, and,
Yeah.
well, there's a chance, I don't know, I can't see it
And
in the 27.
He was good. He was good to the fishermen.
Was he?
Yeah. Yeah,
And he
he
saved a lot of boats.
yeah, he pulled a lot of boats and he never overcharged. Oh, but of course that was
Well, I mean, if that's
in
what
a
they got,
different
that's
time,
fine. I
too.
don't- You know, that doesn't bother me, just,
Yeah.
you know, they are gonna sell it to me,
yeah.
that's all.
And he was real handy. He could do a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah. He could help you out.
I don't know, you gotta have
Yeah.
some up the golf course or something. That type of
I
thing.
remember one
So,
story
we're not
about
at that
him.
level, or, I don't know. I even went
This
to the
was
village.
during the time when we had the Buick engines in the boat. And for some reason or another, I needed a part from a
You
Buick.
know, those type of things.
And so I went down to Hulver's.
I'll tell you what.
I says, Hulver, I need such and such a part. He says, well, he says, I think I got something like that. He says, but let me think about it for a couple of days. So I went back in a couple of days and I says, what about that part, Hulver? And he handed me a snow, this was in the wintertime, and he handed me a shovel. He says, follow me.
And what does that mean to
So
me?
we went out in the yard and pretty soon he stopped and he says, now he says, you dig right here.
For a lemon.
And there it was.
And there it
So
was.
we go with the priority or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
He often says, I have what is known as a constant inventory.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll get back to you maybe tomorrow a little bit.
Yeah, it's really too bad his boatyard is gone.
Yeah, it is. You know, John, I feel just sad to see that condo right there.
Yeah.
Jesus. How this community could allow that, I don't know.
Yeah. No, it was a travesty.
It's terrible. They talk about those people in Washburn having a concern over their waterfront. They've got a legitimate reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not against condos, but they don't have to be right on the waterfront.
No.
They can be built any place. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that if Culver's boatyard were still there, it would be a draw for people.
Why, certainly.
The hell out of the walls and all
Yeah.
that type of stuff, so,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah, well, some people call it progress.
Well, thanks, Julian.
I don't know what you can use out of that.
Well, no, this is for just
Okay.
posterity.
Well, tell you what,
Yeah.
let's take a look. We may-
You're gonna edit this, I suppose.
You know, but I'll
And,
let you know maybe tomorrow, okay? We'll go from there.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you for everything
no
you're doing
problem.
here, girls. I appreciate it.